Update 4.6 introduces new weapons and refines for Draug, Donnel, Clarisse, and Myrrh. This batch has some good abilities, some are simple but effective and others are definitely a little stacked, more than usual. You can grab these new weapons from a 5-star version of each hero for SP, but to get their special refined upgrade you're going to need 200 Divine Dew, which is quite expensive. We'll be going over each new weapon and refine ability, plus talk about some build ideas and journal playstyles. Draug is one of our launch day sword army units, and he actually had an interesting stat line for even back then. 32 base speed for an army unit is quite good, and he also has very high base HP and defense. His new weapon is the Stalward sword. It has 16 might, and when the enemy initiates combat, inflict -6 attack on the foe during combat. This is a very simple but effective ability. A -6 attack debuff is similar to a +6 defense and res buff, so Draug will gain a boost to his physical and magical damage tanking. Now if you pick the special refined upgrade, then if Draug is within 2 spaces of an ally, he gains +5 attack and defense and will neutralize penalties to attack and defense during combat. This is actually the same effect as this year's spring inheritable weapons like the Carrot Cudgel Plus. As an army unit, Draug isn't going to be moving very far, so he should almost always be near another teammate, and for doing so, he just gets more attack and defense. He also doesn't have to worry about attack and defense debuffs, which I would say are rather common, so if you really want a physical damage tank, then Draug gets a lot of benefits. Overall, Stalward Sword is pretty good for an enemy phase playstyle, and it gives an extra attack and defense while also reducing enemies' attack. Combining both effects is like giving Draug +11 defense and 6 res during the enemy phase, and he has some options on what stats to invest in. Do we go for pure extra defense, or do we try to invest points into speed or resistance? If you want to run distant counter, which works nicely with Stalward Sword's enemy phase preference, then Draug may be able to utilize Special Fighter by investing in extra speed. A +10+ speed boon Draug does hit 39 speed, which is quite respectable, and while it's not crazy fast, it can land Draug in that middle ground of being able to avoid some doubles while also being able to double the really slow units. I would think of him like a linebacker in football, where his job is to kind of handle whatever comes at him. He can fight off range threats with some extra resistance from skills like distant defense or switch stance, and Special Fighter plus his higher speed set can make melee duels a little annoying for the enemy. Stalward Sword does push Draug into an enemy phase playstyle, so for the most part you want enemies to come to him. If you aren't interested in distant counter and want quick repose for guaranteed doubles, then you can default to a Vengeful Fighter build. It can work with DC just fine, but if you want to only worry about melee duels, then a tier 3 stance skill would be amazing to stack with Stalward Sword. Bracing Stance 3 would be great thanks to the extra resistance, and Close Defense Sacred Seal would further make Draug a melee nightmare. If Bracing Stance does become a Sacred Seal, you can run Bracing Stance 3 with Bracing Stance 2 for 10 defense and res on the enemy phase. Combine that with the -6 attack debuff, and Draug might be able to face tank range threats without worry. Overall, Stalward Sword is good for a typical enemy phase armor build. Draug is a little unique since he can kinda invest into any stat you want. Playing for more speed can be fun, but the safer move would be to continue stacking defense or res, the later being a little more important. Definitely not a broken weapon, but a nice upgrade for one of our oldest armor units. Next up we have Donnel, a lance infantry unit, and he got the Hewn lance. It has 11 might because its base effect is the same as a brave lance. Donnel will lose -5 speed, but when he initiates combat he gets to attack twice. Hewn lance has 3 extra might over a brave lance, and that is noticeable since you will be attacking 2 times. Now for its special upgrade, when Donnel initiates combat he gains +4 attack and defense, and the foe cannot make a follow-up attack. This is basically a mini sturdy impact effect where instead of +10 defense it's just +4. All in all, a very simple weapon and refined. Hewn Lance is heavily skewed toward a player phase playstyle where Donnel goes in and 2-taps some poor fool. With the added attack, he basically has a 15 might Brave Lance, which is a great upgrade over a normal 8 might Brave Lance, and the fallout prevention can be nice for protection, although hopefully the enemy is just dead before they hit back. In terms of base stats, Donnel has 35 base attack, which is pretty darn good, and with a Hewn Lance, a plus attack boon is the obvious go-to. I know there are some players who utilize Donnel's res super boon for tank builds, and sadly this weapon won't help you there. With Hewn Lance still inflicting -5 speed on Donnel's enemy phase, it will take a hit, so he is kind of being locked into a pure player phase build. For some, this is okay because the build path is super simple. Brave weapons really only care about extra attack unless you're going for quad builds. You can try to make a quad setup work for Donnel, but if you really want a quad attacking lance unit, I would suggest using Cordelia instead. For Donnie, I would suggest focusing on a normal 2-shot playstyle. We have Deathblow 3 or 4, plus the Deathblow Sacred Seal for extra attack when initiating. At its core, you could just run double Deathblow and call it a day. To get a bit fancier though, you can add in low attack and defense, which is actually really nasty for brave weapons. Being able to get rid of enemy defense field buffs is very strong, and the -3 defense debuff is going to get utilized twice due to attacking 2 times. To support Donnel, you can also bring chill defense on a teammate, which would further reduce the defense of a super high defense physical tank. I have used low attack and defense on my Ross with a Brave Axe, and it's kinda disgusting what the guy can do sometimes. Now, to alter this basic build, you can toss in some special ingredients, literally. Specials are always fun to proc, and Donnel has some options. First off, Special Spiral can be a decent replacement for a low skill. Instead of getting rid of the enemy defense, we can just hit them with a bonfire instead. Obviously, we're going to need to charge it up first, but Donnel would be able to fire off 3 cooldown specials every time he initiates afterwards. If you want to pump up bonfire damage, you can run Sturdy Impact in the A slot, and sometimes you might be able to utilize the double fallout prevention effects. If you want to keep low attack and defense, then maybe you can fit Heavy Blade in somewhere. It would be ideal if you use Heavy Blade 4, because if it does proc, you still get additional damage in the A slot, where using Heavy Blade 3 isn't going to get you any extra attack. It also works nicely with low attack and defense 3 because the skill reduces enemy attack stats, which increases your chances of proccing Heavy Blade even with a lower might weapon. We are getting the Desert Mercenaries banner back, which had dual Ephraim, and he has Heavy Blade 4 and low attack and defense, which can both have gotten at the same time. Last, what about Times Pulse? Well, unless you are using a Dancer or you have Joint Drive Attack, the C slot isn't too important. With Times Pulse, you can utilize a bunch of different specials. For example, it can help a Gale Force set by only needing 2 Heavy Blade hits to activate. It can give Donnel a 1 cooldown Moonbow or Ruptured Sky every player phase. You can also use it with 3 cooldown specials and Heavy Blade to simulate Special Spiral. With the Hewn Lance, Donnel is rather simple to build, but there are many ways to modify the standard Brave Weapon setup. Next up we have Clarisse, one of our earlier Grand Hero battle units. Clarisse got the Sniper's Bow. It has 14 might, is effective against flyers, plus after combat if Clarisse attacked, deals 7 damage to target and foes within 2 spaces of target, and inflict -7 attack and speed on those same enemies through their next actions. Dang, so they basically buffed up her old bow and it now inflicts -7 attack and speed. On top of that, it deals 7 damage in the same area of effect. Both of these effects take place after combat should Clarisse hit the enemy. Now it has been addressed that the devs know Sniper's Bow is bugged. The underlying part where Clarisse deals 7 damage after combat is not working properly. If you kill the initial target, you will not spread the 7 damage to other foes, and it's supposed to. This will be getting fixed in the future updates, so just be aware of this for now, but we will be assuming it works properly for the sake of discussion. Now for the special upgrade at the start of combat, if Clarisse has more than 50% HP, she gets +4 attack and speed during combat. If she is also within 2 spaces of her support partner, then the foe cannot counterattack back. Now, not only does the Refine give Clarisse tangible in-combat benefits, but she has conditional fire sweep, which is always good to have. To be clear, the attack and speed boost is always going to be active just as long as Clarisse is above 50% HP. She doesn't need to worry about her partner's positioning for that. Sniper's Bow is pretty crazy. It basically combines Jafar's Deadly Dagger and Layla's Constant Dagger plus Clarisse's old Inheritable Bow. I was literally just talking about Mel Morgan and Sot's unique weapons and how they don't provide in-combat benefits until they make an attack. Clarisse's bow used to suffer the same issue, but Sniper's Bow manages to actually provide an answer. With a +4 attack and speed boost you can easily activate, and to take advantage of all the out-of-combat effects, you have conditional fire sweep to safely attack enemies. This weapon gives Clarisse some neat flexibility when it comes to team roles. She can be a stat debuffer, an AoE splash damage dealer, and she can get safe initiations as a regular archer. Overall, this looks like a very strong bow. However, the biggest boon is that fire sweep effect is only active when Clarisse is near her support partner. Layla's weapon works in exactly the same way, and I believe it has high playmaking potential, but you really need to plan out your moves in advance. Either Clarisse's ally has to get into position, or they have to already be in a spot where Clarisse is going to move to. If you don't plan properly, either Clarisse or her partner are going to end up in enemy attack range, so while Sniper's Bow looks awesome, to fully utilize it, you're going to have to take that into account. For builds, Clarisse can take on Jafar's Double Savage Blow setup. You can deal 21 out of combat damage in an area, which would obviously hurt grouped up enemies. If you want to take down a specific target, you can instead swap in 1 or 2 Poison Strike skills. Some Fire Sweep Bow builds use double Poison Strike and it's very annoying. Clarisse can kinda simulate the same thing, but again her Fire Sweep is conditional. While Jafar can dish out slightly more AoE splash damage, Clarisse does get extra attack and speed for herself, and she lays down attack and speed debuffs, which contrasts with Jafar's defense and res debuffs. For PvE modes, this type of build can be a lot of fun, and I've used Jafar a ton with Double Savage Blow. Add in some dancers and you just deal so much AoE damage. Next, if you want to just utilize the fire sweep effect for your pure combative power, then Clarisse can always just build for pure damage. So Sparrow is definitely ideal since Clarisse has to play around her support partner, so solar skills and bond skills may not always be activated. You can run the Swift Sparrow seal as well, and low speed and defense is the usual B skill of choice because we don't need desperation for this build. In fact, a downside of Sniper's Bow is that desperation is slightly gimped because the extra attack and speed boost only works above 50% HP, and if you're playing on that low HP game, then it's not going to be consistent. Since we shouldn't be getting touched, Clarisse is free to build full glass cannon, and her chip damage plus attack and speed debuffs can help out her teammates. Last, here are some other debuffs you can throw in. Panic and Pulse Smoke would both be annoying with the attack and speed debuffs. Pulse Smoke could be nice for dealing with dangerous targets who manage to get their special charge because again, Fire Sweep would allow for safe attacks. If you want to utilize a dancer and aren't running double Savage Blow, then Defense Smoke is the next best thing. Not only will it give Clarisse 3 smoke debuffs, but if she gets danced, then she can deal more damage on the next volley. Now let's discuss some support partners for Clarisse. Unlike Layla, who actually swaps places with her partner, Clarisse won't be moving around, so her ally choice isn't that important. Ideally, you want a unit who has good mobility to get into certain positions, and of course any buffs to help out Clarisse fight better. A flyer with guidance can fit the bill since they can extend Clarisse's attack range and help out on maps with lots of terrain hazards. A unit like Lilith would be interesting since she herself can warp to Clarisse and then reposition her. If you want a dancer, then Rayson or Leanne would be nice because they provide extra healing in the case Clarisse does take a hit. That is a vital thing to keep track of and adds to the complexity of this weapon's playstyle. Like Layla's dagger, Sniper's Bow has high potential, but it really comes down to your own tactics and possibly the map layout. For example, Clarisse can't just charge forward and keep her fire sweep ability. She also can't really afford to take more than 1 or 2 attacks because if she falls under 50% HP, then you don't get the attack and speed boost or the fire sweep ability. Clarisse can run things like Desperation or Close Counter plus Vantage like Jafar, but the synergy with Sniper's Bow is just a little off. Still, this is definitely a very neat weapon and the base effects of the weapon will always be working. Well, at least when they fix those bugs. Last up for today is Myrrh. She already had her Great Flame Dragonstone, but it got some very nice buffs. The base effect was changed so that instead of needing 5 more defense than the enemy to stop a follow-up attack, now Myrrh only needs 1 more defense than her opponent. This is great due to ongoing power creep, and stopping follow-ups is very nice to have for a tankier unit. Now, the special upgrade if Myrrh starts combat with more than 25% HP, and she's within 2 spaces of an ally, she gains +5 to all stats, and she will neutralize effects that guarantee the foe's follow-up attack. Alright, so a general +5 to all stats is very nice, and it only requires Myrrh to be somewhat healthy and nearby an ally. Myrrh isn't really that offensive, so this should be 2 easily fulfilled conditions most of the time. She will benefit from every stat boost here. Her weapon already adds 3 extra attacks, so another 5 just means more damage. Myrrh can use the extra speed to compete with slower tanks, and the extra resistance is obviously helpful against mages or dragons. The +5 defense though is really good because that directly helps Myrrh proc the base effect of Great Flame. So not only does the effect get buffed, but Myrrh gets free defense to use it better. Now why does the Refine neutralize effects that guarantee follow-ups? Isn't that the same as the base effect? Well, not really. Follow-up attacks work on a point system and they can be cancelled out. For example, a unit like Edelgard who had a weapon that gives her a follow-up attack could previously still bypass Great Flame even if Edelgard didn't have more defense than Myrrh. Now with the partial no follow-up effect, Myrrh stomps out any skills that give follow-ups. A big one would be Bolt Fighter. Enemies will now have to beat Myrrh in defense, and they still need to have more speed than her because the speed check is the only thing left. Another option is to have no follow-up because that would disable Great Flame itself. So despite this very nice refine from her, she still does have her weaknesses. She is still a green dragon, which means falchions are a threat, and she is a flying unit, so archers get extra damage. The refine doesn't stop Myrrh's greatest counters, but boy does it help against everyone else. So in terms of stats, Myrrh is somewhat slow but has good defense and resistance, and being able to prevent follow-up attacks just makes her a nice tank. The build you will see about 90% of the time is just good old distant counter, quick riposte, and IOT shield. Basically, if you already had a distant counter Myrrh, you're very happy with this refine because it just patches up her issues with Great Flame's base effect. With adaptive damage and lots of attack, Myrrh can shred through ranged units, and quick riposte is there for ensuring she gets the kill. IOT shield is here to protect Myrrh from archers, and while I'm not the greatest fan of needing to sacrifice a slot for this skill, the refine does give Myrrh +5 to all stats, which I think makes up for the loss of another stat boosting skill. This build will be best for things like PvE and general content. Basically, Myrrh just soaks hits and fires back. Now if you don't have DC or you don't want to run it, obviously we would like to improve Myrrh's tankiness. Fortress Defense and Res 3 provides that flat defense and res boost, and Great Flame does work on the player phase, which means Myrrh can attack enemies and only take one hit back. Combine this tankiness with Mystic Boost for healing after every fight, and without a high damage unit, Myrrh is fine fighting over and over. Attack Smoke is great for stalling even longer, and you have the Sacred Seal slot open for whatever you want. Quick Repose, Close Defense, Death Blow, Renewal, you got a lot of freedom. Last, if you want Myrrh to be an enemy phase menace, then a tier 3 dual stance is prime. Myrrh will now get access to guard and a ton of stats. Obviously, you probably want a defense increasing stance like Sturdy Stance or Steady Posture. Here you can run Quick Repose or maybe even Vantage if you don't need to deal with too many high health enemies. Heavy Blade would also be nice because flyers struggle with cooldown reduction. For the most part, I'm sure most people are gonna run Distant Counter because A, it's fun, and B, it works nicely with the Refine and the base effect. I still have Fury plus Vantage on my Myrrh, but it looks like it's time to move on. I might have to join the Distant Counter club. Now, a quick tip for those of you who want Myrrh merges, she will probably be on the New Powers banner with Draug and Donnel. However, Myrrh is also going to be on the returning, daily rotating Heroes with Bonfire banner on the 13th. It only lasts for one day. However, instead of Draug and Donnel on the banner, you can instead have Idun and Na sharing the focus rate. That is probably a better deal because those two have some great fodder skills. That's it for this video. What do you guys think about these new weapons and refines? Let me know if you are using any of these units and share your build ideas with everyone else. For me, I'm definitely giving my Myrrh her new upgrade. If I was going to plus 10 another 5-star only unit, it probably would be Myrrh. She is such a beast in Sacred Stones and still fun to use in Fae. I might just cave and spend my stash when she comes on the next banner. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video where we're going to be talking about Gangrel.